Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Oh my gosh, what a live example of reasons we all need to pivot and like right having our shit together during facilitation. So yeah, it's one of my favorite things about facilitating is really understanding how to keep a group of people together and connected, right? And like after the same goal, because that's essentially what it is. Um, so, with that, please feel free to continue throwing your info into the chat. Um, thanks, y'all. I love all the like notes of affirmation in here. So, feel free to keep introing yourselves in the chat. Does anyone want to come off mute and share like why they're here, who you all are?
I can. My name's Adam. My pronouns are he, him. I'm with the Queer Youth Resource Center, and I'm the president of the board. And for me, having more skills on how to work with people and communicate better is always interests me.
Yeah, right. It's so important. I love that. Connecting and figuring out how to relate to people is super important, even in facilitating, right? Um, so anyone else, real quick? 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. Moving on. Thank you for all the intros. I love seeing who everyone is, what's happening for you. So what is facilitating? There we go. So facilitating by definition, right? Like I love breaking things down to their definitions. It's one of my favorite ways to kind of get started with like, what am I doing and what is my goal here? And I also want to preface this by noting that I consider facilitation even a one-on-one meeting. If you are the person leading a meeting, you're facilitating something, right? You are either facilitating getting what you want out of someone, whether it is someone who reports to you or someone who you report to, right? Or even beyond that. Um, being a small business owner, like I have had to facilitate meetings where I'm asking folks for support or asking people like connections to offer trade of some kind for support with my own business. So just keeping that in mind that like I consider facilitation not just something like this that's more formal and what we I think of when we think of a facilitator, but something like a one-on-one meeting, right? You're having a performance conversation with somebody, like things like that. So facilitating is making an action or a process easier, right? And that can apply to a one-on-one meeting. It definitely applies to learning as well. Lead or run a meeting, discussion, things like that, ensuring that objectives are met and all participants' opinions are heard. Now, this part actually speaks to me more than anything, where what I think I love about that definition of it is that we're noting that all participants' opinions are heard. Does that mean that we are going to, what do you think? Does that mean that we're going to like take into account everyone's, or not take into account? Does that mean that we're going to go along with what everyone's opinion is? Absolutely not. But what it does mean is that we're actually going to give participants the space, the platform, right? The mic. We're going to hand that mic over to them, right? So if any of you have any other thoughts on what facilitating is to you, feel free to shout it out or pop it in the chat. And just so y'all know, as we go through this, like, please always feel free to just hop off mute and ask a question, give a thought. You can certainly put it into the chat. I am keeping an eye on it. So, however you would like to communicate that. But if anyone has any thoughts on what facilitation is to them. Ooh, yeah, I love that. So Janine added, loving the reframe of just making an action easier, right? Yeah, that's definitely what a facilitator is. Oh, thanks for noting that, Greg. If anyone's got clicking going on, keeping everyone engaged. Absolutely. Yeah. Love it. Okay. I keep going, but if you have any thoughts of what else facilitating is, please pop it in the chat or just come on off mute and we'll keep it going. Trying to see what's resonating with people. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes along that, to me also, that is like under that umbrella of engagement, right? Like, what are people engaging with whatever it is that we're talking about or discussing, right? So again, facilitating is making that process easier, leading, running a meeting. I also want to think community. Now we've got it here for all of us to see, but if any of you have thoughts on what that is, please feel free to come off mute, share, pop it into the chat. But essentially, a community is a unified body of individuals with common interests, right? And interests, I think, I don't love the whole air quotes idea, but like it does come with a little bit of air quotes behind it, where that can mean a lot of things, right? That can mean, when I think about interests, I think of a business goal, right? Not everyone is going to always directly resonate with a business goal, but they're certainly going to want that to be accomplished, right? If we all want a paycheck, our business goals are important, right? Social activities, those are interests, obviously. Social state or condition, that kind of relates to like what's happening for us in the space that we're sharing. Thanks, Janine. Also common characters, like common characteristics, right? What makes us a community is again, it's what like brings us together. And I think when we're considering our communities here in like ORPIB sort of universe, right? It's probably around our business goals, making a paycheck. You know, if it's just you and the people that like created your business, right? A lot of us are smaller businesses. Maybe it's just turning a profit, right? Maybe it's connecting with our customers, but any of that is really like what makes a community exactly that. Joint participation is also what makes a community, right? Ooh, okay, cool. Just got a couple notes of like turning off camera to finish lunch. Love it. Facilitation myths. So if any of you have thoughts, you can obviously see them on the screen. But if anyone has thoughts that aren't necessarily included on this slide of like, what are some preconceived notions you have about facilitating that either you think still are true or that are myths that you yourself or someone else in your world has already busted for you, right? Like, what are some myths, some really common ones I think of, and what actually like sort of inspired this session is you must command the room. I really dislike this one. Right? Facilitators are leaders, but we're not someone that comes in and just like throws weight around, right? Like we're not here to be like a dictatorship type of relationship, right? Even if you are actually you know dealing with people that report to you, you're not just there to throw your weight around, right? Let's see, the facilitator knows where we're going, and the job is to get the group there. Honestly, that's definitely not a myth. That's a little bit closer to what a facilitator is. The facilitator should know where we're going. I'm so proud of my. Did this go blank for everybody? Okay, cool. Never mind. The facilitator should know where we're going, and I have such a good analogy to this that I will explain more later. But like, I hope everyone in this virtual room is familiar with Ms. Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. But facilitator, she is like my ideal kind of like inspired facilitator. I really enjoy her.
I'm so here for
And I
this.
think I knew you would love this, Janine. So I hope everyone else is familiar, but I will explain it a little bit more down the line. But she is someone that I look to as kind of an ideal facilitator. Um, yeah, when I think, and especially when I think of a facilitator that understands how to vibe check, right? How to create that community and care in a space. You need to know an answer to everything. You have to have an answer. That is not true. That's not our job. Honestly, you're going to seem less credible if you always have an answer. And that, it's so true. I can tell you, I have been in spaces even earlier in my career as a less experienced facilitator and being like, there's no way that this person knows the answer to everything. And then come to find out down the line, they were wrong about a few things, or like they got half an answer, or just like little things like that that really made me like question either why I was supposed to then be learning from them, right? Or like it just kind of, and then it also made me feel icky about like the people that like, I mean, my job, right? Like people that put this person in charge and they couldn't admit like, oh, that's such a good question. Like, let me find that answer for you, right? Tanya has a good myth. Only extroverts are great facilitators. This is so true. I love this one. It's my fave. Yeah, it is not extroverts that are the best facilitators all the time. Honestly, introverts sometimes make the most ideal facilitators. And we'll find out why. But yeah, introverts can make really great facilitators. Honestly, the one thing I think that, or I think a lot of the reason, and actually this is a myth I didn't have on here, is that not just extrovert, but that you need to be a perfect speaker. You need to always be like no ums. How many times have y'all heard me say already? I think I in my brain have counted more than the fingers I have on my hands, which is all 10 of them, right? Like filler, like little filler words and things like that are not, they're not the they're not the detriment to your session that you think they are, quite frankly. There are certainly elements tied to that. And if you are super nervous in front of a group, that can definitely be apparent and present, but it doesn't mean that you make a poor facilitator, right? Also, that facilitators should talk a lot. That is highly true. I definitely am going to do a lot of talking in this one because we only have a certain amount of time. But yeah, facilitators, like good facilitators, probably don't talk a lot. People don't use business speak, more authentic and down to earth. Yes, yes. Be yourself as a facilitator. Like here we are with like retro font and, you know, a presentation that you're seeing in the back end of PowerPoint because I'm on a PC and I'm just not used to it anymore. Like that's wild, right? It's when you are just like, yeah, here's what's going on, right? Or here's how I am. Here's how I navigate this thing. Facilitators are always neutral. And this, I think, comes into play really when we're talking about meetings that you might be facilitating, one-on-ones, like performance conversations, or even like, you know, you're asking for something from investor, superior, like any of that thing. You do not have to be neutral. In fact, being neutral, I think, you know, let's be real, we're all in very specific times. Being neutral is bullshit. I'm just going to say it. Okay. Also one that I noticed, I was like kind of digging around online for some myths, and like one that I found was that learners will always remember you if you're a good facilitator. Again, that's in quotes because what the fuck is a good facilitator? It's a lot of things, right? Learners are not going to remember your content. That's just not how we as people process information anymore. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise. All right. Oh, also a good myth is you have to look a certain way to be a facilitator. You have to like, right? I personally, I call myself too femme to function. That's like my gender identity. And I'm always wearing lipstick. I'll always have at least a tiny bit of makeup on, probably. That's not what you need to do as a facilitator. It just isn't. Like, who cares, right? We do want to respect the people that we're speaking to and have a certain presence about us, but like, honestly, if anyone calls it professionalism, like that's, the way we look or the way that we appear to people, like that's class warfare. And I could do a whole nother session on that, TBD. Any questions, other myths, anything before we move a little bit forward? 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. Sweet. Love it. All right. So here's the reality. Let's talk about what facilitators are not, all of that, right? You're not there to command a room. You're just not. I think that commanding a room. Yeah, I'm doing the countdown out loud because normally, just to like jump in a little bit, but I'm doing the countdown out loud because you can't see me because my camera is off. But yeah, a good little countdown, and also be comfortable with the pausing. This is another reality, right? And it goes back to the myth of that facilitators should talk a lot. A great facilitator, in my humble opinion, is that you will be able to be comfortable with awkward pauses because you want people to answer you. You want them to think you're you want them to know that you're seriously interested in their opinion. So pause. Do that double check. You sure no one's got any questions? No one has anything to add? Like, you really want to create that safety and making sure that people know you're actually interested. And that does require you to be, whether it's virtual or in person, like awkwardly kind of like waiting for a response. And so you can use verbal or visual cues, like a little countdown, like I'm doing verbally now. Normally in the classroom, I'll just do it kind of like I'll do a little 3, 2, 1 visually. So yeah, you're not there to command a room, right? You're there to guide learning, regardless of the nature of the content. You're there to guide brainstorming, opinions. I think learning can have quotes around it too, because I think any time that you're in discussion with someone and you're facilitating, there's an element of learning, right? Even if you're asking for something, you're probably giving some knowledge of like, why are you asking for this? Right. Another one, needing an answer to every question or being that subject matter expert is so unrealistic. And like I mentioned, you seem less trustworthy if you've always got to answer or seem like you know everything about a topic. That's actually impossible. And if we're not always learning, what are we doing? Right. So admit where your knowledge is limited or in need of refreshing, right? The number of times, like I worked for a company for 5 years, and did onboarding training. And I led onboarding trainings every other week, the same thing over and over for like 5 years, every other week, right? That is a lot. The number of times I had to say, you know what? I don't remember the full answer to that question. Let me get back to you, right? It's all about getting the knowledge for them, showing them where it can go, admitting that it's like, you know what, you're asking a really good question, but it's not something that comes up all the time. Just like we're not expecting learners to know every single thing, we're certainly not expected as facilitators to know everything, right? And the way that we have all adapted to technology and learning is that we now store in our brains a lot more readily than actual knowledge. We store where to go get it, right? And so that goes for facilitators. Now, you might have FAQ guides or like little things that people are going to ask all the time, and you certainly will probably have those at the ready, depending on the kind of questions you're anticipating or what it is that you're facilitating. But it is okay to say, this is a great question. I didn't anticipate. Let me get the answer, or have half an answer for you, right? When you're pitching something, it's always good to have answers right away. But it also is really good to say, like, wow, you're bringing up something I didn't anticipate, right? Or I didn't realize wasn't super clear. It's all in how you frame it. Any questions or thoughts on that? Okay. Love it. So why? Okay. Okay, here we go. So, how do you foster that community, right? We've already talked about like myths of being a facilitator. Let's now get into how do we foster this community, right? So what you want to do is balance the learner experience, the objectives of the session, as well as the business goals, right? This is something that is really tricky, and really the ability to do this well comes with a lot of practice, a lot of time, and a lot of like understanding. Yeah. Also, I just noticed Greg popped in the chat. The great question. Let me do a bit of research and get back to you. That is one of my favorite answers. Get really comfortable saying it because it builds trust. You will learn more, right? And it really helps that person in the room who's asking feel comfortable and being like, oh, okay, it is acceptable to ask a question, right? It seems like we should all be doing that and comfortable with that in, Beyonce's year of 2025, but like that's not always the thing. And especially if you have someone who's at entry level or someone who is new to the business world, like they don't know the norms yet, right? We have to put that hat on a little bit. Like facilitators are always kind of juggling a lot of like sort of hats, like wearing hats or like putting themselves in other types of shoes throughout, like at every second. So balancing learner experience, objectives, and business goals is something that you want to prep for, right? That should be part of your preparation. Anytime that I either am hired to facilitate a learning experience, even a meeting, right? If I am like, even as like a keynote person, I'm sitting there asking, okay, like what is the objective of this meeting, right? If it's to hype people up, amazing. What are your business goals? So I can connect that objective to this, right? All of that is so important. Knowing the business goals, that's why we're doing this, right? It's certainly the most boring part, I think, sometimes. Or the most like we're obligated to do that, right? But again, if we don't have business goals, we're not going to be here, right? We need a business goal to get a paycheck. So like, what is that, right? And how does this connect? Throughout my career, when I was an instructional designer, which essentially is someone who makes the presentations, right? I get all the content, I get the scripts, and then I just put it either into a PowerPoint, an e-learning, like whatever that is. I always need to ask, like, okay, so what business goal does this support, right? Like, why are we making this training? Why are you hosting this meeting? Right? So if it's a one-on-one and it's about somebody's like performance, right? Say you're having a tough conversation with somebody, what is the business goal of this? This person is not aligned with company values. There it is, right? If you're not aligned with company values, how can you support the company as an employee? Right? So really thinking about what those are. The learner experience, that's where our empathy comes in, right? That is where we're really starting to create that community, right? But all of these are common shared interests, right? The learner experience, the objective of the session, and the business goal. The other quote secret to this is that sometimes the business goal and the session objective are the same, but a lot of times they're not. So just remember, like, they differ, but they all should relate together in the end. The one that is, I think, the most difficult to balance and remember sometimes is the learner experience. Any questions about these three before I move on to, I guess, my favorite parts of creating community and care?
Yeah, honey, with the learner experience, are you talking about just like how various people might be learning in different ways? Or like, could you explain just that a little bit more?
Totally. Yeah. So the learner experience is definitely part of that. Like, how do people learn? Um, and honestly, when we think about like how people learn, right? There's a couple. I think it's like 7 or 8 different ways. Technically, I think there's a bunch of them. But there's a lot of research that suggests that while that is good to know, you just want to like encompass all of them as much as you can, right? So hopefully there's like a little bit of reading maybe involved, maybe there's some like practice. Sometimes you can't help it. Like this session is a lot of me talking at you. I would love for this to be just like a big old discussion, and I designed it like that, but I just like considering again what everyone's experience is, and I think the expectations, right, of this of the overall experience of Thrive in 25, like it has actually been more helpful to watch people just like share their knowledge, right? And those of us that show up are there to really listen to it. Like that is how I've perceived this audience to be. And also if I'm wrong, please feel free to let me know. But it really is, right? Like when I thought about this, I was like, this is my chance to like share my knowledge. So that's what this is about, right? The other and so like that is part of the learner experience is like, how do I think this will be delivered the best? Like I could write this into like a white paper of sorts, but like that's boring to me. I can't imagine y'all have that kind of time, right? It's certainly faster to take an hour out of our days, like our lunch hour, to sit here and discuss this, right? And be able to ask questions in a chat, pop on, like unmute yourself and like pop in with the question, right? There's all of that. Other elements of the learner experience is literally the community that we create in the space, right? The vibe, which is like why this is called Vibe Check. And honestly, my whole belief in like what I do as a facilitator is like I am providing a bit of care. Sometimes I jokingly call it adult babysitting. And I honestly say that with a lot of like true, genuine, like empathy, care, and like awareness of what it is. But like there is this element of that, right? Like a babysitter is there to care for you, to make sure that you feel comfortable, to make sure that like you're getting your needs met, right? That's part of what a learner experience is. So like, do you have all the tools that you need, right? Down to like, do your learners have pen and pencil, paper? Do they need printouts, right? Like that kind of thing. Does that fully answer your question, Greg? Does that feel clear? I think that was Greg. I don't know.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay.
I think that's great. And I appreciate too, like the element of care and just helping try to figure out how you can get as many people in, engaged as possible. And then realizing too, there might be times where you have to make people uncomfortable to help them in the learning process. And then how do you do that in a larger bubble of boundaries and things like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that up too. And we'll talk a tiny bit about that piece of it in like another slide or two. But yeah, here's the thing. Providing care for someone doesn't always mean that it's comfortable or harmonious, right? Getting to care and even community is messy as hell. Like, right? We all live in communities. They're so messy. There's conflict all the time. So thinking that that won't happen in a facilitation is just being unprepared, right? As far as like I think and would say it, right? Like we have to be prepared for conflict. It doesn't mean you need to anticipate that it's going to happen, but like I'm about to start sharing some examples of like times that like little tiny things either could have been or did turn into like a big mess. And it's really common that it happens because like my whole business tagline is I teach people how to people, right? Like we're all people interacting, and that's what facilitating is. The beauty of some of the facilitating is that people are just listening to us for a bulk of it, but they're still going to like ask questions, maybe say things that we didn't anticipate, like all of that, right? All right. So more on how we foster community, right? When we're thinking specifically, again, about the learner experience, right? It's being empathetic, right? It is, sorry, it's really being empathetic, right? Like like you put yourself in their shoes, what might need. I actually, empathy comes in sort of the, more practical things. Like I mentioned, do they have paper to write stuff on? Do they have a pencil? If you're hosting a meeting that's small or a one-on-one, like make sure that they have the materials that they need to like either take notes or set reminders for themselves, like that kind of thing, right? Like, and that's being empathetic. That's kind of putting yourself in their shoes. And again, we're all adults if we're working, ideally. So hopefully, we don't need to handhold that hard, but you might have to. And that only comes with like trying to put ourselves in that person's shoes, the audience's shoes, like anything like that, right? Ask questions and actively listen really go hand in hand. So when you're asking those questions, actively listen by like waiting for the answer to that question before you respond. Actually care about what their response is, right? And I think that comes with allowing them space, your learner space, your whoever's in the meeting, like allowing folks the space to ask questions of you, right? Whether it's questions of clarity, or just like, what exactly is that? You said this thing and I don't totally know what that is. Another way you can show that you're actively listening is, I mean, I think we all know this, but it's a great reminder, right? And something I think can feel scary as a facilitator is repeat the question back in your own words to like make sure that you understand what they're asking. And I'll be honest, I do this almost every time because I think Janine knows this about me, but I sometimes am very confusing in the way that I communicate with people. Like I will ask questions that I realize when I get the answer and response that like, oh, I asked it in a weird way and they don't totally know what I'm saying or like what I'm asking for, right? So I always like to make sure that I'm interpreting the question correctly. Now, sometimes you won't need to do that, but a lot of times there are questions that you're like, ooh, so are you asking this? Are you asking this? Are you asking for both? Like, what are you interpreting that they're asking, right? Being observant. So this is something that I think is I know that this is my superpower. Shout out to my life experiences. And this comes with a lot of practice, a lot of also mistakes. So don't be afraid as a facilitator to make mistakes. It's going to happen. I was talking to a colleague recently who was like, I've never been written up at all at work. And I was like, oh my God, I have. Like, how do you learn? And not that you should get written up at work to learn things, but I think that while it can feel good to never have been written up, and I certainly don't advocate for that, it also is a thing that like you shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes or have to have a difficult conversation with someone who you report to if, whatever. Or nor should you as a facilitator create a space where people are afraid to have that conversation with you, right? Like making a mistake, yeah, it might really fuck shit up. And certainly there are elements, right, where that is like, okay, it's, separation is what happens, right? Like a mistake can be that bad. But when it isn't, I think it's a really good moment to actually think like, ooh, I get to facilitate like this learning moment for this person, right? So being observant. Do you understand basics of body language. There are certainly theories out there that say body language only goes so far, and I do believe that. So it's not necessarily about being able to just see somebody and be like, oh, they're wildly uncomfortable, or oh, they're having a great time. It's really just about noticing, like, are you giving people in a room a little bit of time to read and no one's reading? Right? Little things like that. That shows a tiny lack of engagement, right? So maybe you need to say, like, okay, let's popcorn read together, or I'm just going to read this because it looks like y'all are a little distracted. Like, call it out, right? Can you also kind of read between lines of what people say in the room? So this is where I have a really fun example. And I think sometimes this, being able to read either between lines or like read into what certain words mean, helps you tell if somebody may or may not find something offensive. In a virtual space years ago, it was a group of queer folks, and we were all talking. It was sort of a social group that also did co-working together. So like a social gathering for us, but we're all trying to be in community with each other and connect. And a white person with disabilities, equated disability rights to sort of rights of folks of color. And while that area is definitely, like, as a person who doesn't have physical disabilities, and a white person, like, it took me just like a second to be like, oh, not a great comparison. Like, let me hop in and like, let me just interrupt this person, right? And stop them from continuing to say things that actually like were offensive to folks. We got like me and the other host got a couple messages of like, can we not do this? And we were able to like hop in and sort of redirect and then also deal with that fallout a little bit later, right? Things that subtle or like that kind of nuanced can happen a lot. And a lot of times it's that people are trying to like get an understanding of things, but we all still have to be aware of what we're saying, how it's perceived, the audiences that we're saying it to, right? Like I would never call facilitating adult babysitting to like learners. Right? And I don't always say it often, but it is a really clear way to say what I think facilitating is, right? Because I'm also providing care. Any questions right now about anything? Okay. Great. The other element of being observant is noticing, right, the whole title of this session, the vibe shift, if the energy changes. That honestly comes with a lot of practice. It can be as simple as someone who's been really attentive and engaged. Suddenly, if it's virtual, they're looking away. Maybe they turn their camera off really quickly. Maybe in a classroom, you notice them like not looking at you anymore, or they start like fidgeting a lot more than they have. Like, it's just little things that you'll be able to notice if you really like practice your content. I think another myth that none of us mentioned about facilitators is that we never look at notes, right? That you should just have your stuff memorized and you're always looking like just directly above the audience's head. Not the best way to go. Use your notes. Read when you need to, right? That does not minimize what you are saying. But with that, we do need to balance being able to actually look at people. So I think a lot of things that we've been told is like, look at people's foreheads, look just over them. And that can be great if you're trying to practice like looking at folks more directly, but find moments to actually look at people in the room if it's in person, right? And if it's virtual, like really do find moments to actually like look at people's faces. So like one of the things I was doing at the very beginning of this, before folks were like eating lunch or turning off cameras or whatever, which is perfectly fine, right? But I was kind of scrolling through on my screen, like who has their camera on, right? Just to know if I need to see like what might be shifting in the room, right? So if you have that ability, like do that. Now, probably thinking like, how do I build these skills? I gave a couple of examples of like how I've navigated this myself, but how do you build these skills, right? Honestly, it is really getting comfortable with being uncomfortable as the facilitator. I think one of the biggest things that I actually haven't thought of until this very moment, so like learning moment for me, right, is like when you take on the discomfort of the room. And that's a lot. That can be a lot. It is by no means easy. And again, it will not go smoothly every time. The first few times it might feel really awkward, but I can pretty much guarantee that like you will have people respond really well to it, right? Especially if you are doing the work to at least attempt. Again, we're people. No one's perfect. So, if you notice a shift, right? If something is happening and you're like, ooh, something has shifted. If you're in a small group and there's trust, there's familiarity, just ask. Do it. Because you're taking on the discomfort by saying, like, hey, I think that I'm feeling a vibe shift. Like, is everyone cool? Do we need a break? Like, maybe it's just that everyone suddenly has to go to the restroom at the same time. That does actually happen, or folks are sort of losing focus because they've been sitting for a long time. Like, feel free to ask that, right? In a larger group, you can also ask, but be aware of how you're asking it, right? Feel free to say like, you know what? I think it's a good time for a little bio break. Take 5, everybody, right? Feel it out. Maybe like check in with yourself while they're all taking a break. Make sure that you can kind of like walk away so no one can ask you a question while you're on this break, and like collect your own thoughts, right? Any questions about that? Okay. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Okay. So how can we pivot? I mentioned taking a break, right? And that is really how you can also practice like, how do you lean into your empathy? How do you lean into the active listening and being observant, right? Breaks are great for that, but they're also really great for pivoting, right? If you get a curveball, take a break. If you feel that energy shift, especially if it's a little hard and you're like, ooh, I do not know what happened, but like, I know something is different. Take a break, send them all on a bio break. Honestly, if you are feeling like something shifted, there is absolutely at least one other person, if not everyone else in the room, whether it's a virtual room or a physical room, that is like, I would like a break from this, right? Or I would like a little moment away. Um, you know, honestly, as a facilitator, the other thing I love to have with me at all times is either a little post-it or a small paper, like notebook, little like legal pad where I can jot down notes. So if something really shifts and you're like, ooh, like I've written down things that people have said before where I'm like, was that weird? Given the group a break once they're done, and then like taking a minute to sort of like think about what had just happened. Right? As a facilitator, we are doing so much like all at once that is really that's really difficult to juggle, and really takes a lot of practice. One of the things I learned at a previous role is like multitasking is kind of bullshit sometimes. Like, it's multitasking leads to a lot of mistakes, but in facilitating, it is really real. And yes, it will lead to a lot of mistakes, but if you actually multitask in an effective way by like jotting down notes, giving people a break when you need it, you will find that you'll be really successful at keeping that community together, engaged, feeling safe, right? Feeling psychologically safe. if you feel it'll help, I mentioned this already, but I think it's really, really worth kind of saying it again and again, and like also ask me questions if you want to about it, but like address the issue, address the conflict directly. It also might not be as intense or dire as you anticipate, right? If you address it, folks may be like, oh, I one time felt like the vibe in the room was really, really tanking actually. And I was like, hey, I'm going to stop because I feel like everyone is either distracted or like really uncomfortable. Is there something that I'm missing? Is anyone we can take a little break? And everyone was like, no, it's just so cold in this room. And truly everyone was like, no, it's summer and it's so cold in this room. We hate this. So like, just know that something like that can happen too. Like you never know what is going on, right? So I mentioned Miss Frizzle earlier. One of the things that is really critical about Miss Frizzle. So if you ever watched The Magic School Bus as a youngster, or if you have youngsters, because I think Miss Frizzle's still around. Janine, is that right? I feel like your kids are too old for that now.
No, we did. Thank you so much for bringing Miss Frizzle back around. She is a household hero. Miss Frizzle is timeless.
I love her. I used to have glasses that I wore that everyone was like, oh, it's giving Miss Frizzle. And I was like, thank you so much for seeing exactly who I am. She truly like a hero of facilitating. I adore her. Ooh, yeah. Okay, so real quick, Greg popped in with like giving folks in the room jobs, note taker, timekeeper, tech support, to help take stuff off facilitator shoulders. If you have that as a resource, use it. Right? Like use it, use it, use it. Also rehearse. If you're using tech, get there early. Like Janine and I were in here early so that I could figure this out. And still, right, y'all are looking at the back end of these slides, which is totally fine. But otherwise it would have been real awkward. So going back to Miss Frizzle, she was a teacher that would take these kids on like this magic school bus ride. Like my favorite one is when they go into one of the kids' bodies. He's like eating lunch and they go into his, I think it's digestive system. And every episode of the show, or like if you look at the books, they get into some kind of like trouble, right? Where it's like, oh no, the bus is going to expand, so we have to get out of the digestive system really fast. How do we do that, right? There's always some kind of like little adventure conflict that happens. Miss Frizzle she always keeps her cool. She always is able to put the kids in new and sometimes kind of uncomfortable experiences. Like taking them into the digestive system of a friend is a wild thing, right? Like how weird would that be? Honestly, I would find that so fun, but I'm weird. So like so just thank you, Janine. So anyway, she's always able to put them into these new, exciting, sometimes uncomfortable experiences, but she is always able to keep her cool. She's decisive, and she never forgets that the students and their experiences are her responsibility, right? And even when you can tell that she's a little like, oh shit, what do I do? Like she kind of keeps that to herself because she needs to keep the kids calm, right? They're kids. They're like under her care. And as much as I don't want to say like think of your either meeting attendees, your learners, your team like as children, that's kind of why I refer to facilitation as adult babysitting. It is a little bit like that because you really want them to just be able to like put all responsibilities aside and just sit there and learn, right? Or like hear what you're saying. Again, if it's a meeting, you want them to absorb as much information as possible and then understand where else they can find that information going forward. Okay, there's like a minute left and I finished. We did it. Does anyone have any other questions, thoughts, anything?
Do you have any suggestions where like you're collectively working toward a goal where like folks are contributing their own thoughts and feelings and stuff like that, like ways that you can just kind of help in that process of bringing forward ideas and thoughts and feelings?
Yeah, absolutely. So if it is like brainstorming, that can actually be really cool and fun. With that, I always recommend like a good icebreaker where maybe in groups, if you've got a big enough group, right, or all together, you're sort of like solving a little problem. One of my favorite ones is the spaghetti noodles, like dry spaghetti noodles and like marshmallows, and you have to build like a big, like the highest tower you can build. Um, and there are other ones you can do too, but those are really good to like kind of just get people in that mindset, and also like working together to like hear each other, right, and like give each other sort of the driver's seat. um Other things are to just do like round robin intros to get people like understanding each other. So if it is something where you're wanting to say like, where you're wanting to be um like shit's uncomfortable in the office, let's discuss it, right? Doing a round robin intro of like, where are you today? And you can do the stoplight like red, yellow, green. And they can go into, I always give them the guideline of medium detail. So you don't necessarily get a whole life story or too much, but you also get a little bit of like, I'm at a yellow today. Like, I feel uncomfortable in this meeting. I kind of don't want to be here, right? Which you might get. And if you want, Greg, I do have a little time to hang back. So if you want to ask more specifics, but is that helpful?
Yeah, it's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And also too, like if you are setting the vibe and really able to kind of say, to like notice like where people are maybe needing space, that's great too. Also, you can do like a little activity where people write down on Post-its and put their ideas on a board so they feel a little separate from them. And no one really can see who's putting what on there. Like they can, but it doesn't feel like it. Ooh, the blob people graphic is a good one too. Thank you, Janine.
I like about it to hear different interpretations of the graphic as well. Like you'll see, these like human figures interacting with each other, and one person will imagine that the person is falling and being caught, and the other person will imagine that the figure is falling and being pushed. And it's really interesting to sort of like get to know the room like that going around.
Yeah, yeah, and that can give you a really interesting view of like how people see each other and see relationships. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So it's 1:02, so I'm gonna let everyone like get back to their day, but please feel free to like email me. I think Jenny put my LinkedIn in I think that's my LinkedIn. Is that mine? I don't know.
That's the blog people, but I will send a follow-up email, I promise.
But yeah, my email and stuff will be in there. It's on the slides too. And you'll get the slides and it'll have notes. So you'll be able to see a lot of the like stuff that I was saying too. And I'll throw some links in there as well for where I do some extra research, because sometimes like I check into like Psychology Today every once in a while. Just to kind of like make sure my assumptions with people's like body language or little things like aren't fully out of line. So yeah, just keep learning. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much, Jenny. And to those of you who are still here, thank you so much for being here. Our next session is next Wednesday. It's on networking for introverts. I know I need that so much. Look for my follow-up email and please stay in touch. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You did it.
I did it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm excited. That was more fun than I thought, and that was way better. I'm gonna even zhuzh this and do like a whole Miss Frizzle theme, I think.